Hello, and welcome to our 2019 GRESB Results webinar. My name is Allie Goldstein, and I am a Senior Analyst here at GOBI. We are excited to have over 200 people from across the world with us today. Thank you for joining us. During the webinar, we will learn how GRESB is growing in the commercial real estate world, discuss strategies on efficient GRESB preparation, submission, and outstanding results. We will recount success stories from this year and review the excellent results of the industry in general and our clients in particular. We also will be discussing the latest emerging trends in the ESG reporting space and covering some of the best practices for you to implement across your sustainability reporting initiatives. Today's session will run about 50 minutes in length, and we've left time at the end of the presentation for questions. Please feel free to use the chat feature to submit questions during the webinar. The session today will be recorded and sent to all of the participants. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers for today's webinar. Elena Daniel, the Vice President in ESG of Corporate Affairs from Centerpoint, Dan Winters, the Director of Americas with GRESB, and Helee Lev, our Chief Revenue Officer at GOBI. Dan, the stage is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone on the phone. It's great to have 200 folks. We're calling in now from Chicago, where as much as it took a long time for summer to arrive, it's still here, right? Middle of September. And I'm here because we had a great results event last night hosted by the GOBI folks. It's results season for GRESB, and we had our first one in New York last week. Toronto was on Wednesday, Chicago Thursday. Next week is San Francisco. So if you haven't been to one and would like to, you're welcome to join us next Thursday at Salesforce Tower. What we thought we'd do today is just kind of go through some of those results if you can't make it to the event, and talk about what GRESB is what our participants have done and showing in the data set this year. So just to remind everybody what GRESB is and what we do, we assess and benchmark the ESG performance in the real asset sector, so that's both real estate and infrastructure, and we provide standardized and validated data to the capital markets to help them make good and better decisions when it comes to sort of non-financial data in a structured format. So by taking a look at this slide, right, GRESB sits in the middle between two different stakeholder groups. On the right side are fund managers and listed companies. Those are the ones that participate in the assessment. Our assessment is open from April until the end of June, and companies will submit to the assessment, and then in July and August we go to work, and in September people receive their benchmark scores, and those become available to the folks on the left, which are the institutional investors who have positions in these funds and firms who are very interested to know how companies are doing on sustainability and what their plans are to continue to improve their portfolios and companies going forward. If I think about our results, and what's really interesting about this year is we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. And so this is meant to depict sort of the state of affairs in 2010 when we started and where we've come as of 2019. So on the left, you can see at the top, we've got our three original investor member founders, APG, PGGM, and USS. And that group has grown to 100, well, it's actually more than 100 institutional investors that subscribe to our data and use GRESB to understand what's happening within their portfolios. Some of these folks are using it to do carbon footprinting of their real asset portfolios, both real estate and infra. And so the power of those 100 institutional investors it's really been able to move the market. So the next metric that I want to draw your attention to is sort of down towards the bottom, the number of participants. First year of GRESB, we had about 200 participants because those three initial investors had a lot of positions out there in the marketplace. We've now since grown, and this year we're pleased to report that we topped 4 digits, and we're over 1,000 of both private equity funds, which there are 750 of those, and 250 listed property companies round out the rest to get us to over 1,000 this year, and it's a big accomplishment. We're quite pleased about that. And then the last, which also hits the theme of 10 years, 100 institutional investors, 1,000 participants, is 100,000 assets. So those 1,000 participants cover 100,000 assets. The amount of data that we're receiving at an asset level is also at an all-time high. Of those 100,000, 66,000 data points came in from assets and their trailing 12 months of energy, water, waste consumption, which is a big jump. Last year we had 49,000, this year 66,000, and we anticipate that number will continue to increase. Here's what that participation looks like from a graphical standpoint, and you can see back in 2010 we had 200. You can see the different regions. Europe leads with most participation, but in the United States, and well, actually in North America, we have very large portfolios. So when you look at assets under management, North America by far leads. And so that's what those numbers have grown to look like over the 10 years, and I really like the slope of that graph. From last year to this year, it's trending up. We all like to see that. Of these, I mentioned 250 listed property companies. Most portfolio managers out there think of an investable universe of roughly 400, so that's pretty strong coverage. And then 75 of the top 100 private equity firms in the world participate in GRESB. And from folks that I've talked to, that number will increase again next year. Looking forward to that. From a standpoint of sort of cohort and binning, the way to interpret this slide is the group that started in 2010 that has continued year over year to what I like to say wash, rinse, and repeat with GRESB. Is that group, there's roughly 40 of those folks, have continued to increase their score year on year on year, and that cohort now gets an 84 on average, right? Good solid 4 to 5 star range for that group, and that just goes to show this idea behind ESG is a journey. You don't just snap your fingers and make it happen. It's a year on year sort of management gap analysis and improvement process that the GRESB framework sort of reinforces with the participants. And then on the far right, you can see that the average score from the 170 new participants this year was a 58. So folks are spending some time putting policies in place before stepping forward with GRESB. And it's nice to see that that average score is going up. And what that tells me is that the industry has really embraced ESG. So when you look at this histogram, the light green on the left shows the distribution of scores in the first year. And you can see they're kind of bunched on the left-hand side. So you had a lot of folks that were scoring, 25, 30, right, the average score. So I think the average score was 35 that year. But a lot of participants weren't scoring very high. Well, look, after 10 years, the whole graph has shifted way to the right. And so the long tail is now companies that aren't scoring, terribly well, and with a real clustering of some high achievements, and we'll see that in a graph in just a moment. From a size and location, we talked about the amount of capital. You can see that's the black flag, right? USD of 1.8, roughly rounding up, $8 trillion of capital under management in the U.S. participates in GRESB, and that covers roughly 38,000 assets. A lot of assets in Europe, but smaller size. And then Australia, we have tremendous market penetration there, with nearly all institutional investors covered by GRESB, and they compete very hard. We'll see that in just a moment. The little call-out graphic on the far right just shows the listed data coverage. If you're an investor that follows like the S&P Global Real Estate Index or the FTSE EPRA Nareit Index, right? In Europe, you've got 75% of those companies. North America, 64%. And that number has grown year over year. I believe the North American number in 2016 was 50%, so that's pretty strong growth. And we're seeing continued interest from some yet to participate REITs to participate. Part of that is that S&P just announced that they're going to be using GRESB data for a green index overlay on their current real estate indices. And so that becomes accretive and beneficial to REITs that participate and do well on GRESB. Oh, here we go. And then this circle is meant to show that we also have a public disclosure grade that we issue, and that goes out for 650 odd property companies globally, where we go and we look and see if they're disclosing on ESG practices, how they're doing, and we'll provide a grade from A to E. So there's a lot of companies out there that are putting 10Ks and putting ESG metrics into their 10Ks and Qs, issuing sustainability reports, having information on their websites. That's what an A company looks like. Companies that aren't talking about or disclosing anything, obviously that's an E. From a distribution standpoint, there's 1,005 dots on this graph, and this shows where each, this shows the clustering of the 2019 results. So you can see in the upper right where there's that strong concentration of companies that are doing quite well. That's pushed the average score year on year, continuing to go up. Private companies are getting closer to the listed cohort when it comes to their ESG scores. The listed companies are typically better at disclosure, so they get a couple more points in GRESB, but the private companies are catching up with data coverage. And so there's some folks down on the left that are just kind of starting out. There's folks in the upper right that are competing hard. The slash lines through it denote where the 5-star rankings line up. So the top 20% get a 5-star, the middle 20% get a 3-star, and the bottom 20% get a 1-star. And so that's what that distribution curve looks like. From a geographical standpoint, the Australians continue to compete very hard on ESG, and so they have a strong lead with an average in the 4-star rank. But North America's caught up to the EU, and I think that's really the headline here with 2019. It's a good, strong clustering of the other regions, and the North Americans had been behind for a number of years, so it's really nice in aggregate to see us catch up. So what that looks like, I think I need another click. There we go. You can see the size of the circle is the average fund size. So in the US, it's about a $7 billion fund. That is the average size. In the EU, it's smaller. That's the dot farther over to the right. And then the difference between the circle and then the filled-in circle was just the average score last year to this year. So the headline here is that all scores are up and participation is up. So we're doing pretty well as an industry for the most part. In North America, we've got the Brazilians and folks in Mexico. There's a groundswell of activity, so we're seeing more portfolios from those regions stepping forward and participating in GRESB. The Canadians are still beating the U.S. by, I like to call it, they're beating us by a maple leaf. But nonetheless, they are ahead, and they're proud of that, and so the U.S. has a little work to do to catch up to the Canadians. Talked about assets, 100,000 of them came into the assessment this year, 66,000 reported asset level data, and of those 25,000 reported with full data coverage, meaning that they can get both tenant consumption data and landlord control data, and that excludes outliers, things that might be vacant buildings or some data anomalies that might have shown up in the data set. So we've got a really strong data set now of 25,000 assets, and we're looking forward to building on that as we flip the calendar to 2020. We looked at the EUIs of this, and sort of a mixed bag here, some mixed news. If you look on the left side, Americas versus global, right? Our our EUIs are a little lower in retail. They're much higher in office. And I'll draw your attention to sort of the lower left, the energy, the orange graphic there. Our energy was up about 1%. So been doing some thinking why that is. And if you think about the number of data points that came into our set last year, we had roughly 15,000 assets that reported at the asset level in North America. This year it was 22,000. So just by the sheer volume of asset level data that came in, we received some great assets, I'm sure, as part of that, and we received others that hadn't been reporting. I think that is a pretty good explanation as to why energy consumption is up, more participation. However, when you think about that and you compare it to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the industry at whole was tracking quite well and doing better than the SDGs would be to meet the Paris Agreement at 2 degrees Celsius. So unfortunately this year, that green line has now crossed the orange dotted line and we're sort of off track. Now, if we also pair that up with the companies and participants that issued and answered the question on targets, do you have a target? Well, that's what the graph on the right is. So 11% of our participants, roughly 110 of them, have absolute carbon reduction targets. Another 30% are looking to drive down energy on a like-for-like basis. 21% don't have targets, right? And if you don't have a target, what are you shooting for? And what's good is, the good news here is that the number of no targets has decreased, so more companies are stepping forward and putting targets out there. That's great news, but there's still 21% that should be bold and set some targets. And here's where we're at as an industry, and let's try to catch back up and get on the other side of that orange line. So with that, here's how to contact me if anybody's out there and is looking for my email address. It's probably the best way to go. And with that, let me turn it over, because I had the pleasure yesterday to spend an afternoon sort of lunch and learn at Centerpoint Properties. And Elena was there, and she was telling me about the great programs that they've put in place. So I'd like to take the moment now to turn over to Elena, and let's hear a little bit from you as what's happening at Centerpoint.
Great. So this is just a really exciting time, I think, for us sustainability executives across the country. One of the best things, obviously, is having these GRESB results. So I love hearing your story, Dan, so thanks for sharing that with us.
This is another year of everything up and to the right from Dan Winter.
All right.
Including the pool championship last night.
Drove me through a pool tournament. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm glad I could seed that idea, and I didn't mean to come in and then steal all the glory.
From the mouth of the champion. His idea, and then he wins the tournament up and to the right. Dan Winter, up and to the right.
Yeah, good, all good stuff. So we had an exciting night. But let me tell you a little bit about who Centerpoint Properties is for those on the call that don't know much about Centerpoint Properties. So we acquire, develop, and also operate industrial warehouse facilities. We are across the U.S. in a variety of key markets. We have about 61 million square feet in our inventory, as well as 320 properties and 418 tenants.
Wow.
So we love our customers. So we have a lot of exciting stuff happening related to ESG, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about our story. I actually came on to Centerpoint in May of 2018, so I've now been in my position for about a year and a half. We've had some really great strides throughout the organization. We formalized our commitment to ESG, so across all dimensions of sustainability, which is obviously the environmental, social, and governance side. So really our story and our framework has been very much in development over the course of the year and a half. We have a variety of things that we focus our operations on in relation to ESG. There's a variety of key areas that are shown on the screen to all our participants, but really, this really tells an all-encompassing story. So it's not really just about being green. So how do we move beyond the green component of this, and what does this really mean? And you can really tell by all of the different spokes here that it really does tell a very solid story in terms of where organizations should be today. So obviously you have your governance reporting, which for me, I feel like is really the main structure that really holds a lot of your ESG priorities, your objectives, your measurements, your metrics in place so that you can report out to your stakeholders. But then you have other programs that you want to institute, such as your energy optimization program. What does that mean to your organization? For us at Centerpoint, it really means that we want to get that consumption data. That's really key for us in our industry today, especially, we're very much challenged, obviously, from an industrial side because we have triple net leases. So we're always looking, how are we going to get this data so that we can, number one, obviously, look at the consumption of all of our properties, but also improve our properties over the long term.
Well, the thing that really impressed me yesterday was your tenant engagement program. Can you talk just a little bit more in granularity about that? Because it seems pretty industry leading.
Yeah, so we're very happy of where we're at today. We obviously always have room for improvement, but our team is really focused on this. One of the we've been actually now reporting into GRESB for the last 3. This is our 3rd year actually reporting into GRESB. What we found is really our tenants want that kind of personal connection. They want to understand what we're using the data for. So what are we using the data for? How is it going to benefit them as well as obviously our company as well? So we're really trying to focus more on that customer outreach and really telling the real story.
It's been effective, right?
I was going to say, I might add some color to this as the one person in the room who knew Centerpoint before and after, pre-Elena and post-Elena. So when we first started working with Centerpoint Properties about 4 years ago, there was a directive that came down from CalPERS that said, you must and you will do GRESB. And poor Rick Matthews in the legal department called us up and said, I don't know what it is. I just know CalPERS said I had to do it. What do I do? And everyone on the phone, or a lot of people on the phone, can relate to this story where someone else in the organization, be it the head of legal, the head of asset management, director of property management, is tasked with, wearing this part-time sustainability hat. They don't often know how to do it. So we embarked with Centerpoint on a journey. Fast forward a couple years later, enter Elena, a full-time dedicated resource, a creative, some great energy, added so much, not just to the tenant engagement, but just to the overall program, just giving it some structure, some credibility, and it's really made all the difference. So not to say that if you don't have a full-time dedicated resource, you can't have a successful ESG program, but I've personally witnessed it be all the difference for CenterPoint.
Well, and clearly the data shows that more energy data came in. CenterPoint's GRESB score jumped as one of the many components of things that they did because of that, and so that's great. I'm sure that there's more tenant engagement along the way, but probably choosing some tenants that have sustainability programs, you can sort of meet them where they are, and it's a good spot, and then you start working on others that are less engaged on this topic. Is that for the strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it's about communicating, obviously getting the data from the tenants, but then also how are you going to tell your story as a follow-up? So for us, I just want to mention that we also became Energy Star partners this year, and that was really key. So what we're looking to do is we're trying to move our entire portfolio to Energy Star Portfolio Manager. That really kind of helps us as a tool to really tell the story in terms of how the tenant's consumption is over time. So it's allowing our asset managers and our project managers to actually sit with their customers and really discuss what kind of trends that they're seeing and what kind of improvements can be made to the facility over time.
So when you went to talk to the tenants, you said, look, our goal is to maintain this Energy Star Partner of the Year designation, and we're trying to do this and do this on everybody's behalf, and so please join us in this, and to do so, that means we need some data.
Yeah, and really kind of telling the story. So obviously telling the story is really important. Having that communication piece is really key to any program. So can't just do things in a vacuum. So we're really trying to get out there, really trying to obviously report not only internally, but also externally as well. It's really helping us tell our story. Bringing that over, we have a range of high performance developments that we're working on right now. We're working on some really exciting things. We have about 17 projects right now that are in our development pipeline. In all of those facilities, I want to say we have a variety of key sustainable components that are going to be delivered on each and every one of those projects. So we do track those as well. The other thing that we do, so I've worked really closely with all the development managers across the U.S. on that. We're also obviously looking to certify those facilities. So we're looking at LEED certifications on those. And then we are actually doing some things that perhaps not everyone's necessarily thinking about, but we're always looking at the future.
Well, hey, so I saw in your headquarters you're aiming for Fitwel certification, right? And you've got a lot of daylight in there, you have a great gym, right? So I think that would be one of the first Fitwel industrial buildings if that happens, yeah?
That would be
I don't
fantastic.
see why it won't.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm ready to go. So we've been actually discussing this early on when I came in. We started discussing a possible Fitwel certification. It kind of, we actually went through and did kind of a little task team and discussed all the different components and what we can improve on. But we think that we're there. We think that we're ready to go forward on that. So we're very excited. So we'll have a big celebration, and I hope that you come back to Chicago for that, Dan.
Sure. Well, then that's that health and wellness.
Yeah.
Bucket down there, right?
Yeah, so health and wellness is really key for CenterPoint. One of the great things I think about the GRESB reporting module this year is you actually included some really key health and wellness attributes to the reporting this year on GRESB that we obviously are really focused on health and well-being for our employees and our people. Without our people, we can't succeed in business, so it's been really key for us.
Well, so that's the thing. We took that health and well-being module that we put out there 3 years ago. We learned a lot from the industry. We engaged and understood, who was doing what some best practices were, and bang, we baked that right into the assessment. And not everywhere, right? Certain questions lent itself to that, but you can see that proliferated. So now we have our resilience module, right? That's in its second year. That's been doing great. I know that your company scored great on that. And one of the things that also stood out in that meeting yesterday was this business continuity effort and the woman that presented that, she was quite proud of that effort, and it was pretty intense.
Yeah, that was really exciting. So that was a huge undertaking for our company, but also excellent that we've done it, and now we have a business continuity program in place. Obviously, we have a whole resilience structure that we've been working on We've been working on a whole resilience structure prior to this, but we really were not really tracking where we were and what kind of improvements can be made over time. One of our employees actually identified that we didn't have a business continuity program in place.
Sure.
So Stacy, who's the head of insurance for our company, came forward and said to our executive leadership team, we really need to institute a business continuity program for the company. So we really did a huge engagement process where we engaged all the executives throughout the company, all the leaders. We included all the business unit functions as well, which was really key. And we brought on a really key partner to help us develop a business continuity program that would be successful for our business.
One of the things that she said that I took away from that is now she's asking some of your key tenants, do they also have one? And I think there was also perhaps some guidance as to what happens in an emergency or a difficult situation in one of your buildings, like how to turn off the water and the lights and whatnot. So that's all kind of rippling through.
Yeah.
And to me, that's one company did something, but is now engaging a whole bunch of other companies. And that's I think, a good news story. Up and to the right, right?
Up and to the right, always must be. So one question I might ask you, Elena, you've put together obviously an impressive framework here with regards to ESG and all these aspects that kind of make your program what it is and unique to you guys. I often like to uncover the story behind the story, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the story on paper, the framework, and extremely impressive, again, from where I've seen you guys come 4 years ago to today. But tell me a little bit more, what's unique in your own personal toolbox? What are the tactics that you use or the things that you use that are maybe not on this paper to really propel this organization from scratch, literally ground zero, to this robust, successful program you have today? So secret, tell us, tell everyone.
So I really have two really key ones that I obviously there's many tools, right? So there's a list of tools that we use on a daily basis because every day you're dealing with at least, 10 to 20 different issues or aspects to the position. But really for myself, one of the main things has really been communication. As a national company, we have teams that are very far and not located exactly where our headquarters are. So you're going to have issues or programs or projects that really have either an ESG component that they want to develop, or you're going to also want to have some issues management or some, things that you want to further discuss. So that communication has been really extremely pertinent for us to have, and for me to have.
And how do you strike that delicate balance between, you never want to be the annoying green sustainability people, but you got to be persistent to get what you need. So, on one hand, you want to be like, I need this information, I'm bothering you, it's me again. But on the other hand, if you don't kind of do that, you're not going to get what you need. So how have you found that balance of, being persistent, getting what you need, but not being annoying, but still maintaining, just kind of a good reputation for the whole program?
I was really fortunate. I was just thinking, as you're talking about that, I was just thinking, how did I really get everyone deployed? How did I really deploy all this so quickly? But I was just thinking, I'll never forget, my CEO actually brought me into his office probably about a week into my role and said, we're having our annual event in a couple weeks, and I want to make sure I put you in front of the company and make sure you talk about it. Are you comfortable with that? And I was like, absolutely, sign me up. So I want everyone to get on board as fast as possible. So just having those opportunities to really discuss what ESG is in front of the whole company, that's really key, so they can really understand really what that ESG journey is all about. So
that's sort of what is it, what's in it for me? I always watch company after company. You got to trip that trigger, and whether you're the CEO or the property manager or all people in between, right? If they know that they're contributing to that, it's just kind of baked into what they do. That's where the victories start to really happen.
Absolutely.
And it can't just be top down, it can't just be CalPERS with the finger pointing saying you must. It really has to be, to your point, Dan, buy-in from all levels of the organization. And sometimes that's just with education and understanding. It's not that the property managers want to be difficult. Sometimes they just don't understand how their role fits into the bigger picture. And we talked a lot yesterday about how sustainability is kind of matured into this ESG concept, which is really more all-encompassing of the organization. It's not just sustainability in its little vacuum off to the right that's just green. And, it's now becoming part of a responsible organization. And folks that do well in ESG, they perform better financially, et cetera, et cetera. So now you have interest from all levels. And I think CenterPoint has really just embraced that over the years. And in a tough asset class, right? I mean, you guys are always the ones that are saying we can't, triple net, difficult tenants, limited scope. I did my parking lot lights, I'm done. But you guys have really shown that that's not where it ends for your asset class.
No, I'm a true believer of definitely moving the needle and definitely challenging ourselves. What's next, or what's better, or what's a better solution. So always looking at next steps. What I love about our team and about our company is that I constantly get, either calls or just an email. Did you see this article? Did you? I'm having this issue. Is that something that you can help me with? We have this client that needs this. Is this something that we can do? So we're definitely always looking for those ESG solutions across the board.
Are there any that bubble to the top that you found interesting? I don't know. We have never talked about this.
All the time. But one of the latest ones that is really kind of going to drive some of our communication going forward is, as I mentioned before, our asset management team has really that direct relation with our customers. Customers are really key for us, and really also telling what the ESG story is all about. So one of the things that is bubbling out of this is actually we have a new communication that's going to be going out to both internally and also externally that really speaks to the stories that are happening across the board. So how did we improve the performance on a facility? What was actually required of that? How much time did it take? What's the ROI on it? What's the payback period? So we're looking at, what kind of benefits did it bring the employees of the industrial facility as well? So we're really looking at it from a whole story standpoint, instead of just being a numbers, instead of just having numbers put out externally, is what's really the story behind it.
No, but you're still looking at daylight and thing and white roofs. I saw on some slides yesterday.
Yep.
Yeah. So
50% of our roofs right now are of white roofs,
Yep.
And so we have a great roof management system that helps us track all of that. But right now we're also instituting energy optimization reporting throughout the company. So we're actually, every single project that we do that's EO, we're instating that we report on all those numbers and figures and the payback.
so a pre-post, right? An intervention, right? We did something. This is what it was like. We did something, and now here's the after effect, and here's the ROI on that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously as industrial owners as well, vacancy is obviously really key for us. So you want to make sure you hit those high marks in terms of vacancy. You're not going to have the vacancy that you need if you're not having a building that's performing at high performance. So you want to make sure that you install the correct, HVAC systems and lighting systems. You want to make sure that you're the first property that a tenant's going to look at.
Curb appeal is key.
Yes.
Yep. Great.
Yeah, definitely.
So I have an up and to the right question for both of you guys from your standpoint. Do you feel pressure by that, right? So GRESB is on the ups and ups as a cohort, as an organization, globally, everything is up. And what you guys have been doing at Centerpoint, what kind of pressure do you feel, for next year? Is it, how do you manage that and continue to succeed and improve? Do you fear the plateau?
Totally. Yeah. Good
honest answer.
Well, when you see a graph 10 years constantly up and to the right, every year is a reset, and every year on January 1st you start again. We lose, funds, because funds will liquidate. You've got, Blackstone taking Dream off the table last week, so they were getting ready to participate in GRESB, and now they're gone. That just happens. So there's natural attrition within our data set. So we're constantly attracting more. This year we attracted 170. It is not easy. And then when you already have 75 of the top 100 IPE, they're either going to come from other portfolios internally that are being managed or new folks. Now, the good news is, this morning I had a get-together with a firm that's going to participate next year. Yesterday I had one as well. So there's tremendous, I'll call it wind in the sails for ESG momentum. And whether it's on the private equity side or on the listed side with things like the S&P index and the green index and whatnot. So ESG has a lot of momentum, but I still face every year with trepidation of making that up and to the right continue to happen.
And Elena, you too, or you still feel like you're in your...
There's a lot of things that we do to really stay on the forefront and really be forward-looking. So I really, there's a couple of key things that we do. So number one, we really rely a lot on our partners to really keep us up in terms of the latest trends, what's the latest technologies, where is lighting going to go next in terms of our properties, or what is next in terms of health and wellness, and how can we continue to deliver that for our employees. So really looking at our partners that we we work with. And we have a variety of different partners that we work with across the board from CenterPoint. In addition to that, I also rely on a lot of industry organizations too. So I recently became a ULI Greenprint member, and I love those roundtable discussions that we have, really looking at other leaders to get, what are you working on? What's some exciting news from your front?
Yeah, it's such a good community, right? That's one thing that we were talking about. It's a lot of the same faces that you see throughout the years, and people don't really move much, and I think it's because we all feel good about where we are, what we're doing, and there's still more challenges to be had, more victories to be had, more success to be had, and it's a nice cohort of people for sure.
That's the dynamic in Australia, right? I like to call it co-opetition, where you've got people that cooperate, but yet they compete. We're professionals, we have our own companies and doing our own things, but still we want best practices.
Yeah.
And we want to hear those stories from others to find out, okay, well, hey, that's a good nugget. I'm going to apply that to a problem that I have.
Yeah, really just collectively move the whole industry forward, the whole group, the whole cohort forward, because we all benefit from that.
Sure.
Yeah,
right.
we see that as well.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that network of professionals is really key. I always come back and I always call us the sustainability rock stars. So
nice.
Mm-hmm.
Self-proclaimed
Yeah.
sustainability rock stars.
Don't ask me to play an instrument or sing. Can't do it. I can only play pool.
And finish a Rubik's Cube.
Oh, I did that for you too. That's right.
Dan had to overachieve the moment he arrived at Gobi headquarters yesterday by finishing a Rubik's Cube in minutes.
Well,
Up and to the right.
Yeah, that's a challenge I can't achieve, unfortunately.
Cool.
I want to see it.
Yeah.
okay, so it's on Heelee's desk. All right. Well, Helee, you've got some stuff for us too, yeah?
I do. I mean, mostly this is about you guys. We're super excited, obviously, our continued successful partnership with GRESB and just seeing CenterPoint blossom into this wonderful, robust, really just a kind of an example of a sustainability program from out of nowhere, where now you've almost become the poster child, and now you can evangelize all the great things you've done. So it's definitely exciting for me to see. So as long as you guys, this is about you today, but I'll flip through a couple of things just to help. Yeah. So just some other trends that we're seeing in the industry. So one thing that we always talk about is, at Gobi, we want to be green. We want to do the right thing. We want to leave the planet a better place than we found it for our children. But at the end of the day, we're business minded as well. This thing has to have some ROI. It has to make business sense. It has to increase value of your operation or attract investors. And there is some value that you can assign to the intangibles of employees feeling like they have a better place to work, or curb appeal for tenants that wouldn't have otherwise looked at you. But that's hard to quantify. But we do like to quantify what we can, because at the end of the day, we're all running a business and it's for a profit. And we want to be mindful of that with everything that we do. So why is it so important to identify, define, defend the case for sustainability in today's business environment? Kind of what we said, right? So there was once upon a time where the fear was, when times are good, sustainability is up and to the right. But when times take a turn for the worse, it could be the first thing that gets cut. It's a nice to have, it's not a need to have. It's our job in this industry, the sustainability rock stars, if you will, to make it a need to have, to ingrain ESG so deep into an organization, to all aspects of the organization, that you literally couldn't pluck it out, even if you wanted to. Obviously, attracting investors is a big reason why. Sometimes for folks, it can be the only reason why that they get started. So we have people that come to us that say, I don't know, the investors want this green thing. What do we do? And that's not a bad place to start. Or it can even be ordinance related. I have assets in a city that requires mandatory energy disclosure. I got to do this thing. What do I got to do? But oftentimes that's a beautiful beginning of something that becomes more than that, more voluntary, more exciting, where people start to see more benefits than just compliance.
And I think that was my point last year at the results event, where I was talking about the two entry points in the GRESB. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's compliance. My investors say, thou must, therefore I will. Mm-hmm. But the other way is curiosity. And it's, hey, our competitors are doing this. We are doing things within our organization. It's probably not organized. There's those random acts that are of sustainability that are happening out there. But I'm curious. So how do we sort of put this into a framework and do better and do more things in a coordinated way? So it's either compliance or curiosity that are typically the entrance points. There's a lot more curious than compliance happening right now.
Interesting. So yeah, compliance, the reason it's there, it's not to annoy you. It really is for the greater good. And another thing that I've seen, so I just hit my 7-year anniversary at Gobi this week, which I'm excited about. Flew by. Time flies when you're having fun, working with great people, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I've noticed, even just in the disclosure, the mandatory compliance, just the amount it's grown. So I think of the map, right? The map of the U.S. and now the province of Ontario. When I started, it was like 12 dots, 12 grassroots efforts for mandatory disclosure. Now it's like 30-something, and that's just in the past 7 years. And these have nothing to do with the climate of the federal government or anything. These are grassroots, city by city, here to stay, no matter what, and just increasing, year after year. Elena, you talked a lot about just attracting the tenants, and Dan, the curb appeal. You don't know who's not coming to your properties because you didn't check that first box. So it's really important. The opportunity cost is real, and if you're not checking that box, you might be missing out on tenants and talent too. So you talk a lot about how your program, has a lot to do with your employees as well. And one of the costliest, as we experience, as any business experience, turnover is extremely costly to an organization. Anytime you have to recruit someone, train new people, you want to keep your people. You know what? Money can only go so far. You can throw money at them, you can throw a bonus at them, but people want to be part of a good community. They want to be part of a company that cares about them, that shows you that they care about you, and it goes a lot farther sometimes just than, a raise or whatever it is. Have you seen that at all? Like, we talk a lot about tenants and externally and, attention you guys have gotten in GRESB. What's some of the buzz or feedback you've heard from your employees since you guys have instated these new policies and programs?
We've been doing a couple things, at least and definitely on the talent front. First of all, we have a new director of human resources who's excellent, but she's also been working with several team members in the company on internal communications plan. So really focusing on, obviously telling what's really establishing a really positive momentum across the office. What are some key accomplishments across the organization? Sharing those stories. In addition to that, we have a new recruitment video that we just recently worked on. It's excellent.
Oh, cool.
Our marketing team put it together. You can actually see it off of our CenterPoint website page. In addition to that, we really want to establish that we're an ESG company. When you bring back the ESG component, we also established a landing page this year for our organization. You can go to centerpoint.com, click on the ESG, doing our part, and it can tell you what we're doing across the board related to the environmental and social governance initiatives that we have.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so Dan, I like how you refer to this as the random acts of sustainability. This is so true. And there's a lot of folks that we talk about that haven't gotten their whole program off the ground, but they are doing really good things at the asset level. It could just be a property manager that has some really good intuitions and does the right things from prior experience. But you can't tell the story in your organization. And more importantly, you can't share those best practices unless you really extract them out from the properties and, disseminate them in a meaningful way. So steps. I think we talked about ESG really being a life cycle. It's not, collect some data, report to GRESB. It's really, here's another Dan Winters quote, wash, rinse, repeat, right?
Yep.
It's something you want to keep doing, right? You want to always be goal setting, always be improving, certainly save some for next year, but just always thinking about it as a life cycle, not just something that you do periodically or once in a while, but just part of your living, breathing, functioning organization. Goal setting, absolutely part of that. And different organizations have different goals. So, we spoke with someone this morning that's just trying to get their ESG plane off the ground. They're actually not sure that their ESG plane can fly yet or that it applies to them. There's still some unknowns to be hashed out. So their goals are going to be different than, someone like CenterPoint, where you guys next year are going to have maybe some more lofty goals or bigger challenges because your program's a bit more mature. A lot of questions you can ask, and happy to share these, at a later date. But there's different questions that you can ask to extract what is the value you're trying to get out of your ESG program, and the different perspectives within your organization. What's important to all of them, because it matters to all of them, but kind of in a different way. And you got to be able to ask the right questions to extract that meaning and figure out what is going to mean that your program is successful to each of these different groups. Budget's obviously a big thing. So at GOBI, we have some creative ways about getting your ESG program subsidized by other groups in the organization. That's my teaser for now. Ask me about it sometime. Yeah. But you have to have a budget, right? So not all budgets are created equally. Not all ESG programs are created equally. And you need a partner that's going to help you curate an experience and a program that fits your needs. So maybe it's a crawl, walk, run. Maybe it's year 1, we're going to put our baby toe in the water. And year 2, we're going to put 2 toes in the water. And by year 5, maybe we'll dip the foot. Or maybe it's a...
Do the cannonball. Come on.
Maybe it's a cannonball. For some people, it's a cannonball. So we're happy to adjust, whatever you need. Of course, Dan has to overachieve and talk about a cannonball. It can't start with a toe. It has to be up and to the right. It has to be a pool championship.
Please, up and to the right with the cannonball.
All right. So yeah, whether it's a pinky toe or a cannonball, we can help you do that. And then just looking at opportunities. So at the asset level, at the regional level, across different asset classes, across different disciplines, there's a lot of opportunities there, but you need to look at them in a meaningful way. And you also need to evaluate, I like the phrase, if the juice is worth the squeeze. So there's a lot of things you could do, right? You could throw a lot of money at things, but is it worth it? Do you need to do that? Is that the most optimized way to be achieving your goals? What are your goals? So you really want to take a step back and say, yeah, I could do all this, but is the juice worth the squeeze?
I always tell people, make good business decisions. That's what this is really all about. And certainly don't spend, a lot of dollars to chase a GRESB point. That makes no sense.
Yeah, I liked how you put it this morning in the meeting. You said, GRESB is really just a framework for responsibly running your assets. It's not about points and green and this and that. It's really just a way to run your business better.
They're best practices. You just look at every question in there. It's a good, solid corporate or asset management best practice. And a lot of them live in what I like to call the Stephen Covey important but not urgent quadrant of our professional lives. So how do we get some more urgency around that, right? And we've just laid out what those things are, and are you doing them or not? And here's what your peers are doing, and we create a competitive sort of environment to push up and to the right.
I think we have a mantra for the webinar today. I think you should rename it. The webinar is called Up and to the Right with Dan Winter. All right, so just being mindful of time, want to save time for questions. So a framework, you got to kind of know what you're doing. So in order to take your organization from random acts of sustainability to something really structured, where there's goals, where there's KPIs, where you can measure what you've actually done, you need a bit more thought into it. You need a strategy. You need a framework. You can't just be throwing a bunch of data into a program and, like spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. You got to really think about how you're doing this, why you're doing this, what are your methodologies for data collection, what are you actually trying to achieve, and not just looking at the next 12 months, but really the next 5 years and beyond that. Or, we talked about earlier today, you'll always have someone in an organization that's like, I've put out these net zero goals for the year 2040. Well, how are you going to get to that? Are those realistic? Or are you just banking on you're going to be retired by 2040, it'll be someone else's problem? So you got to really think about what you're trying to do in the short term and the long term. And leadership. So the most successful ESG programs we see are not the ones that happen in a vacuum by a director of sustainability off to the right. It's ones that we've talked about, similar concepts. The CEO is engaged, the investors are engaged, the business units are engaged. So Elena has a nice quote yesterday from her deck of I thought it was interesting, the head of corporate finance, right, saying something nice about ESG or something about how the ESG program has affected, of all departments, corporate finance, right? So if you can get them to shed a positive light on your ESG program, I'm fairly certain you can get anyone within the organization. And you have an ESG program with tentacles, and it's sticky, right? Because now it's penetrating all these different groups within your organization. So the team. That's exactly it. You got to get the right people around the table. You got to get them engaged. You got to hear what's important to them. You got to know what that guy with the mohawk and sunglasses wants out of this program, and then you have to deliver it. And the way you deliver it to him is going to be different than the way you deliver it to the bearded gentleman or to the double bunned lady.
Exactly.
And check your progress. So you have to deliver there has to be some teeth in the program. It can't just all be feel good, warm and fuzzy. You got to set a baseline. You got to improve upon it. You got to communicate that. And you have to show meaningful ways that what you're doing has an impact and has an impact on the asset value, that it really drives NOI, that it isn't just a warm and fuzzy endeavor. And you need good tools for that, perhaps like Gobi. There was it. Just one shameless plug. Just one.
You can do it.
That's it. Just one.
You're our host.
And then promoting your performance. So this is something actually that I think that CenterPoint, you guys have done a good job. You've done all the right things. There's real improvement at the asset level. We've measured real improvements. We've done better in GRESB. We've reduced energy. We've done all the right things. But you guys are also, you're singing it from the rooftops. You're getting a lot of good marketing, PR benefits out of your program and the things you've done, as you should. But you guys are doing it in a way that's tasteful, you're promoting your performance, you're talking about it, but in a way that it's inspiring other people, and it's showing people that in a difficult asset class, you can still do really great things. So this is not a small part of it. And I do like the image, by the way. Shout out to GRESB Marketing. That's
well, that young man looks like a future ESG rock star to me.
Yeah, yeah, I can see him.
It could happen. All right, so a little bit more detail on that. We'll save that for after. Let me know.
Aww.
This is where everyone goes, aww. All right.
Who's this?
Who's this guy?
That's not I think that might
Henry.
be a rando. That's not my dog. That's all over our website.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, so we got some questions.
Yeah, but just to reiterate, thank you, Elena, for sharing your insight into CenterPoint's ESG strategies and initiatives. So now we'll dive into the Q&A portion. To start, our first question is for you, Elena. Elena, congrats on the incredible GRESB achievements for this year. What would you say was the most challenging part of the whole process?
We were talking about the data consumption. I think data consumption will obviously that will be a long-term thing for us, is always looking at how we're going to get more data and how we're really going to understand our facilities. But I would say, as a key other challenge really for us is getting everyone on board. I love that visual that Helee had of the dream team, because that's really what we're trying to achieve is what does that ESG dream team look like? And like you said, they don't look alike. You're really using all the players within your organization, and that's the dream team there, is everyone is really incorporated into ESG, and everyone has a role. So
it's funny, this morning before this webinar, I met with a company that's that's going to participate next year for the first time. And so I walked into a meeting, and there was somebody with our reference guide printed out, and there were tabs, and there were stickies, and there was a yellow pad with a lot of questions for me.
Did you give them a gold star?
Oh, they were very prepared. It was outstanding, right? And the key thing that I impressed upon them is that, look, you're about to do a treasure hunt through the organization. You're going to get confronted with question number one: do we have this? Oh, geez, I need to go talk to legal or HR or whoever. And then you're going to go to get data, and you've got to corral a bunch of folks. So this idea of a dream team, it's really just the team, and you got to get the team together. Again, what's in it for me? Why are we doing this? Why do we need that? But ultimately, the folks that are doing sustainability learn an awful lot about the company. And once they do this report, I will tell everybody here to a person that I have been in meetings where somebody with a C or executive, whatever, in their title will look at me and say, geez, I learned a lot about my organization because we went through this.
Yeah, and one thing I might add to that from the seat of the service provider is, so every team's unique, right? Every company is their own special snowflake, their own fingerprint. We as a service provider need to supplement and complement what they have. So if there's a strong voice or a strong personality, we want to help and we want to work with that. If it's quiet and they need us to step up and be that strong voice, we want to work with that. So as a service provider, we're trying to fill in the gaps, but also kind of go with the flow. Right? So we want to supplement whatever you have going on, and that's why we really believe in the importance of, the consultancy and the human element. It's not just a software. Sustainability can't be canned. It's not a repeatable process. It's not an assembly line. It's really unique to each individual customer, and you got to get to know their story, their people, and figure out, again, as a service provider, how you complement that, how you add to that, how you don't be disruptive, but really just help them, achieve their goals.
Yeah. Helee, that's funny you bring it up, because another question that came through was actually, how does GRESB differentiate from other service providers?
Yeah, I think it's just that. So there's definitely a component. You want to leverage technology, right? Because at the end of the day, the source of truth is the utility bill. And there's a lot of bills and there's a lot of properties. And you got to figure out a meaningful way to extract that data in an accurate way, in a repeatable way, without annoying the properties. So there's definitely some component of technology, and you want to remove the human element as much as possible. Last thing you want is property managers keying the cost figure into the usage column or adding a zero. Don't want it. Want the technology. But then you need to complement it with the human element of, this is someone's story. This is someone's ESG program. It's unique. It's different. So you really need the perfect blend of both. And that's where I feel that, we fill the gap differently than other peers in the marketplace that are excellent in other ways. But that's just how we approach it.
Yeah, definitely. Another question that came through is for you, Dan. How does GRESB recommend to plan and execute data collection for the next reporting?
Oh, get started early and often, right?
Yeah.
So, we purposefully don't do consulting. What we do is we administer this framework, and we take in a lot of information from Sydney, Australia. There's groups there that get together and give us feedback on our assessment. We have our benchmark committees. There's 4 in each region, right? I pick on Sydney, but there's also a group in the UK, the Better Buildings Partnership. And actually today, they announced, I think, 15 or 20 signatories that are going to commit or have committed to net zero buildings by 2040 or 2050, right? It was a big announcement. And so that group gets together and they give us a lot of feedback. So, we purposely don't do consulting, but I have observed organizations where what you're going to report come December 31st is what happened this year. Well, right now it's September, so you've got 4 months. And that doesn't mean sit on your hands and wait. It means get started and figure out, even if it's a triage, what are my top 10, 15, 20% of buildings, whatever I can do to get started in Energy Star or having policies in place. Do that shadow assessment, print it out, and start looking at it to figure out where you're going to be. I know people start drop boxes and they put all sorts of systems in place to get ready for the information that's required come April when that portal opens. So get started.
I liked my analogy this morning of taxes. I was like,
oh, you brought it up again. No, we're not.
I know, sure, but like, why don't you tell me like it's like going to the dentist? They're like, that's not going to make me do it. Tell me it's like Christmas.
It is like Christmas.
The only reason I say it's like taxes is because, to your point, the year closes, okay? So the year closes in 3 months. So what we're submitting next July is effectively what's happening right now. So don't wait till January to be like, oh, new year, I'm going to get this sustainability thing off the ground. Yeah. The time is now. The time is now. There's still things that can be done this year before the year closes, before your tax year, your GRESB year closes, where it can feel like Christmas if you've done all the right things to get prepared for Christmas, like you've made a list and bought presents. I don't know. I'm Jewish. I don't know. Is that what people do?
Well, there's also, there's budgeting, right? So, there's other things that are happening here. But I will say that the Christmas moment is on September 4th when everyone gets their results. They open up their...
We hope, right?
Yeah, well, you find out if you've been naughty or nice.
I see. A lump of coal or...
Could be. Some people in the lower left, right, they didn't make it up to the right, having a hard time spelling ESG. Here's your lump of coal. You can do better next year. I'm confident in you.
Do you know what you get for Hanukkah? Do you know what the traditional Hanukkah gift is?
What?
Money.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Money.
Well, that's what I got last night for winning.
That's what I got. No one returns money. You know what I mean?
Well, thank you for the money last night for winning the pool tournament. I'm taking my wife to dinner.
The ultimate prize, cash is king. You have to mention it again, though, that you won the pool tournament.
You brought
One
it
more
up.
time for everyone, in case you didn't hear. Dan Winters was the champion of the pool tournament.
Inaugural Gobi pool tournament.
Inaugural Gobi pool tournament. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're winding up here.
Absolutely. Just a few more. If Dan, you can answer this. Are the EUI figures normalized for operating hours?
No.
For example, they are not.
No, we don't get normalized data like that.
No. Okay. That's the answer for everyone.
No.
That's a hard no.
That's a hard no.
Yeah. Moving on to our last but not least question. That's for Helee. So I like that Gobi offers a holistic solution with ESG data technology supported by the ESG consultants. When should I contact you if I'm interested in submitting for next year? So
I think we just covered that. I mean, time is of the essence. There's still stuff we can do this year, but not for long. So let us know. We're happy to get you started. The other thing I might add too is it's not a race to just submit for next year. So as you're talking about a holistic ESG program, you're thinking about the next 5 years, 10 years, the random goals someone threw out for net zero in 2040. You want to think about it. You might spend the next year getting GRESB ready. You might spend the next year laying a foundation for your ESG program. You might report in 2021. So, don't be afraid to take that first step and figure out your journey. But it doesn't have to be jam it all in, to report next year.
Well, so I hear that question. I think to myself, because I'm aware that people all of a sudden in April or May hit the panic button and say, oh my gosh, right? And then it puts people like in the service provider business in a tricky spot. So you definitely don't want to do that. And that's why we're having the webinar at the time that we're having it now. I don't know.
It could be a rolling basis. You can send half of your year data now, and then when 29th January hits.
The whole idea of getting GRESB ready is nice, but you get the business intelligence out of it only after you've stepped forward and put yourself out there and put yourself into the pool. So you want to be part of that participant pool. It's about the score, but it's not about the score. It's about what you do with the information that you get once you get it, right?
Also elaborate on that for a sec, because we are talking to a couple people that like they're thinking about it, but they're nervous because they might do bad, and they're like, I'm almost afraid to submit. I want to put it off till next year just because I'm afraid of how I'm going to do. So maybe you could spend a minute speaking to that just to alleviate the concern of like, it's okay if you're not GRESB ready. Just start or not. I don't know if that's right.
So this was the conversation this morning, right, with this different group. Everyone gets a grace period if you so choose it. That is that put your toe in the water. Only you get your results. You show up in a data set with your name, and it says, yep, you participated. And oftentimes that's what institutional investors want. When your capital raiser's out there and he gets or she starts getting asked questions about ESG, you want to have a good cogent response. Yep, we're participating in GRESB. We have some policies in place. We're working a program, right? And that'll at least get you to the next part of the conversation. So by participating, you're able to do that. With the grace period, you're the only one that gets your results. I'll tell you that some people participate on a grace period and they're like, damn, this is great. We did awesome. Turn it off, right? We want to let other people see how we did, right?
Have a little boy shout it to the microphone.
Could be, right? And there were a couple listed companies that wanted to be in our data set because they did far better than they thought. Others will say, okay, well, that was a good start, right? Even there's companies that score in the teens and 20s, and that's fine, right?
Is there anyone that it scares away completely where they do the grace period and they're like, this is horrifying, thank you, we're done? Has that ever happened?
I'm sure it has. I'm not aware. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. But I observe that people keep coming. They will come back. And even if it's a year or two taking a time out, there's too much momentum behind ESG to be sitting on the sidelines. And it will be a differentiator between companies that are worthy of institutional capital and ones that are, there's a lot of choices out there. And I will point out that 50% of private equity funds that are started to go out to capital raise never achieve a first close. So if 50% don't achieve a first close and everyone has similar strategies and similar, people running it, right? What sort of things can you do to sort of tilt the balance in your favor? Well, being conversant and cognizant on ESG is certainly one of those things.
Excellent. So again, being cognizant of time, I think we're over, but I will, Elena, nice job. You just jumped right in here. It's not easy with Dan and I to get a word in, but you killed it.
Great. Thanks for having me. I've had the last 2 days with you, so it's been fun.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody on the phone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and to close out, on behalf of GRESB, Centerpoint, and Gobi, we thank you for chiming in on today's webinar. And if you have any additional questions or your question wasn't answered on the webinar today, please feel free to email info@gobiinc.com. We hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you.